Imagine spending like 6 months building a completely fake company.
Right, just from scratch.
Yeah, from scratch. You set up the corporate website, you create all these detailed LinkedIn profiles for, fictitious employees.
It's a huge time investment.
Exactly. And you slowly, methodically earn the trust of the quantitative trading community on Wall Street. You do all of this half a year of very human, very slow trust building just so you can execute a bank robbery that takes exactly 10 seconds.
10 seconds. I mean, it sounds like a movie script.
It really does, but that actually happened last week in the decentralized finance world. Today, we're looking at a world moving at two very dangerous, very different speeds.
Yeah, it's wild.
Welcome to today's deep dive into the April 12, 2026 stack of sources. For you listening, our mission today is to connect the dots between global diplomacy that is basically grinding to a halt and technology that is accelerating so fast it's breaking the systems we rely on.
The contrast in the material today is just profound. We're seeing physical, geopolitical gridlock agonizingly play out over days and weeks. And that's running in parallel with digital arms races and cyber fallouts that happen in, like, milliseconds.
Right.
The system's built to protect us, whether that's international arms treaties or literally just the password on a middle school laptop. They are fundamentally outpaced by the tool designed to break them.
So we're going to unpack these marathon peace talks that just collapsed in Islamabad. We'll look at AI models being quietly withheld from the public because they're simply too dangerous.
Yeah, that Anthropic story is huge.
Oh, it really is. And we'll explore how tech companies are actively rewriting their own climate pledges just to keep the servers running. But stick with us, because after all these intense systemic vulnerabilities, we're going to pivot to a deeply emotional story from the Coachella stage this weekend.
A very different vibe for sure.
Exactly. A moment of pure, unoptimized human resilience that basically has the entire internet hitting pause today.
So let's start with a gridlock. The most immediate fallout in today's sources comes from the collapse of the U.S.-Iran peace talks in Islamabad, Pakistan.
21 hours in a single room.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about the physical reality of a 21-hour marathon negotiation. You have diplomats exhausting every possible angle but hitting a wall of fundamentally incompatible demands.
Right, and it ended with Vice President J.D. Vance having to walk out and announce a failure to reach a deal.
Which is just a massive breakdown. Iran refused to commit to halting their nuclear weapons development, which was, the core U.S. requirement.
And on the flip side, Iran was demanding specific ironclad guarantees regarding their control and access around the Strait of Hormuz, along with the right to maintain civilian nuclear technology.
And the vice president stated the administration left its final and best offer on the table.
Right, which, in the mechanics of diplomacy, leaving an offer on the table is sort of a calculated stalling tactic.
How so?
Well, it prevents the talks from being permanently classified as dead.
Oh.
It keeps this microscopic crack open for back-channel communication. But it does absolutely nothing to change the immediate volatility on the ground.
Yeah, the fragility of the broader U.S.-Iran ceasefire is already showing stress fractures across the region.
Definitely. And those fractures are incredibly visible today.
Right, and we should state up front for you listening, we are just reporting the facts of the briefing here without taking any political or geopolitical sides. We're just looking at the sources.
Absolutely. The facts are that Israel is actively intensifying airstrikes across Lebanon. Lebanese authorities are now reporting over 250 people dead.
And Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's office explicitly clarified that the 2-week ceasefire brokered with Iran does not cover their ongoing military operations against Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Right. They are sending ambassadors to Washington to discuss a separate Lebanon ceasefire, but they're retaining full operational freedom in the meantime.
And this is where we really see the physical gears of international relations locking up. Diplomacy requires time, it requires consensus, and geographical compromises.
But when that physical diplomacy breaks down, the conflict doesn't just pause to wait for the next summit, it immediately shifts domains. The battlefield moves from the physical borders of the Middle East straight into the digital networks powering the rest of the world.
Yeah, when an international cyber agreement fails in Islamabad, the collateral damage isn't just felt in Washington, D.C.
No, not at all.
The front line moves to the water treatment plant pumping out of your kitchen sink. On April 7, the FBI, NSA, CISA, and the Department of Energy issued a joint warning.
And it's a severe warning.
Very. They stated that Iranian-affiliated hackers are actively escalating attacks on U.S. critical infrastructure. They're targeting oil pipelines, gas facilities, and municipal water systems.
Because the concept of a national border has entirely decoupled from physical geography. A border is no longer just a line on a map defended by a military. Your local municipal water server, which is likely underfunded, running on legacy software, and connected to the internet for remote monitoring that is the new national border.
Wow.
It's a network perimeter. With the peace talks failed, the risk of a retaliatory cyber strike against those soft domestic targets is at its absolute highest point all year.
I want to stop you there because this completely redefines how we need to think about national security.
It really does.
Traditional diplomacy feels like, I don't know, dial-up internet.
Right.
It relies on handshakes. It takes 21 hours to download a single agreement, and if someone picks up the phone, the whole connection drops.
That's a great way to put it.
But modern conflict operates on fiber optics. If foreign intelligence services can just bypass the Pentagon and directly attack the local power grid, keeping a hospital running in Ohio, are our current defense frameworks just totally obsolete?
Well, they're built for a different century. The diplomatic frameworks assume that both the attacker and the defender are moving at human speed. But when you remove the human speed limit and introduce automated digital exploitation, the damage occurs before a diplomat can even draft a response.
Which brings us back to that 10-second bank robbery we mentioned at the start.
Yeah, the crypto hack.
Let's look at that April 1st hack. North Korean state-sponsored hackers drained $285 million. They hit 5 drift protocol vaults on the Solana blockchain.
And the actual extraction of the funds. 10 seconds.
10 seconds to steal nearly $300 million.
It's staggering. And this really highlights the specific vulnerability of decentralized finance, or DeFi. In a traditional banking system, if $285 million suddenly moves to a known hostile entity, a central authority can freeze the transaction.
Right, they flag it, they reverse it.
Exactly. It takes days to clear. But on a blockchain like Solana, the entire point of the architecture is that it executes smart contracts instantly and without a central authority.
So once the hackers gain the access keys?
The code just executed exactly as written. 10 seconds and the liquidity pools were completely emptied.
But the mechanism of the attack is what fascinates me. It wasn't just a brute force algorithm hacking a firewall. As we talked about, it took a 6-month social engineering campaign to set up.
Right, they had to bypass the human logical filters first.
Exactly. They posed as a legitimate quantitative trading firm. They built relationships, got into the inner circles of these DeFi developers, and manipulated them into granting the access that made that automated extraction possible.
It perfectly bridges the two speeds. They used the slow, methodical pace of human psychology to bypass the security and then used the ruthless, unregulated speed of the blockchain to extract the value.
And if we zoom out from cryptocurrency, we see this exact same lack of guardrails accelerating in the global weapons space.
Oh, absolutely. Back in February, the New START Treaty officially expired.
And that was the final remaining nuclear arms control pact between the U.S. and Russia. It mandated continuous inspections, limits on deployed warheads, shared telemetry data, all of it.
Gone. 50 years of continuous arms limitation agreements just evaporated. Russia has openly declared it's ready for a geopolitical landscape with 0 nuclear limits.
While the U.S. is simultaneously accusing China of conducting secret, low-yield nuclear testing.
Right, so you have 3 major global powers entering an arms race that has literally no ceiling and no oversight.
And it's not just the traditional nuclear payloads that are unregulated now. The sources point to an explosion in AI-powered targeting systems, hypersonic delivery vehicles that travel too fast for current missile defense tracking.
And fully autonomous weapons.
Yes. We are looking at an entire ecosystem of warfare advancing without a single international treaty governing how they can be used.
The technological capability is vastly outstripping the diplomatic capacity to contain it, which forces us to look at how this safety dilemma is playing out in the private sector.
Okay, let's get into the Anthropic disclosure because this is wild.
Yeah. Anthropic, one of the leading AI laboratories, just disclosed they are intentionally withholding the release of a new AI model.
Because it's too dangerous,
Yeah,
right?
It's exactly. They stated its capabilities in vulnerability discovery and exploit generation are simply too dangerous for public release.
Let's break down what that actually means, because they don't mean the AI is getting really good at guessing passwords.
No.
Vulnerability discovery means you can feed this AI millions of lines of software code, the code that runs banks, hospitals, or those municipal water plants we talked about, and the AI can spot a tiny, invisible flaw that a human engineer missed.
And then the exploit generation part means the AI can automatically write a custom virus to break through that specific flaw.
It's the automation of zero-day exploits.
Precisely. Traditionally, finding a zero-day vulnerability required a team of elite hackers working for months. Anthropic's disclosure implies their model can do it at scale in minutes.
But relying on a private tech company to withhold an AI model because it's too dangerous, I mean, that's like relying on a single arms manufacturer to voluntarily stop selling bullets during a war.
The ANDAID.
Yeah. It might pause the shooting today, but the blueprint still exists. If Anthropic has figured out the architecture for this, an open source developer or a state-sponsored lab is going to figure it out tomorrow. Are we seriously relying on corporate self-regulation for the most dangerous dual-use technology on the planet?
That is the defining vulnerability of our current era. Without international agreements like the expired New START Treaty, but, adapted for artificial intelligence, corporate honor systems are the only friction we have left.
Which is terrifying.
It is, and the historical precedent is clear. If a technological capability exists, an adversarial actor will eventually replicate and weaponize it.
And if an adversary cannot hack the physical infrastructure and they don't have the fastest hypersonic weapon yet, they pivot. They attack the narrative.
Exactly. If you can't hack the power grid, you hack the reality of the people voting on who manages the power grid.
The battlefield seamlessly shifts from critical infrastructure to public information. And we're seeing this play out in real time with the historic Hungarian parliamentary elections happening today.
Right.
And again, for you listening, strictly neutral observation of the facts here. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has held power for 16 years. He is a deeply entrenched, key European Union ally to both Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump.
But today, he is facing a massive challenge from opposition leader Péter of the center-right Tisza party, who has been holding a 7 to 9 point lead in pre-election polling.
And voter turnout is historically high?
Yes, and the BBC published a comprehensive report detailing how this specific election has become a primary case study in AI-generated disinformation.
Right. The campaign targeting Magyar has been saturated with AI deepfake videos. And these aren't like clumsy Photoshop.
No, they're incredibly advanced.
They're highly sophisticated synthetic videos and synthetic audio clips specifically designed to amplify anti-Ukraine fears and fracture voter trust at the last possible minute. They're using algorithms to target this content to the most vulnerable demographics on social media.
And the mechanism of a synthetic audio attack is incredibly insidious because it bypasses our critical thinking entirely. Well, when you hear a voice, your brain is evolutionarily hardwired to map that audio to a human identity before your logical filters can even engage to ask if the audio is real.
Oh, wow. So you trust it instinctively.
Exactly. When you deploy these tools at scale during an election, the goal isn't necessarily to convince the public of a specific lie. The goal is to flood the zone with so much synthetic garbage that you actively degrade the public's baseline ability to agree on what reality even is.
That is chilling. But, narrative control isn't always a covert, state-sponsored deepfake operation. Sometimes you just buy the narrative out in the open.
Oh, the OpenAI acquisition.
Yeah. On April 2, OpenAI made its first ever media acquisition. They purchased TBPN, the Technology Business Programming Network.
Which is a hugely popular live tech and business talk show.
Right. And bringing a founder-friendly tech media platform in-house is a massive vertical integration play. OpenAI now commands a direct owned channel to shape how the general public perceives AI safety, development, and regulation.
Which raises some massive conflict of interest questions.
Huge ones. There is a fundamental difference between a tech company buying a microchip manufacturer to secure its supply chain and a tech company buying the news station that reports on tech companies.
Yeah, that's a completely different level of control.
Think back to Anthropic making safety decisions in a vacuum. If OpenAI starts making similar unilateral decisions about what is or isn't safe for the public, and they concurrently own the media network responsible for explaining those decisions to the public, that is textbook media capture.
It really is.
Who is left to objectively hold them accountable?
Nobody. You build a closed loop of influence. You author the technology, and you author the critique of the technology. It's a stark illustration of how power and narrative control are consolidating into the hands of the organizations building the infrastructure.
And that idea of media capture, of systems operating without guardrails, it isn't just happening in billion-dollar boardrooms or foreign elections. That exact same vulnerability is crashing straight into the laptops sitting in your local middle school.
Right, because the macro forces always filter down to the local level.
Always. A new report from Clever finds that over 50% of U.S. public K-12 schools have now experienced a cybersecurity breach.
50%.
More than half. Education has become the #1 global target for ransomware attacks.
And it makes sense when you think about it. Schools are massive repositories of sensitive personal data, social security numbers, medical records, financial information, and they operate on notoriously constrained IT budgets.
Yeah.
The report highlights that a staggering number of these districts still lack basic security controls, like multi-factor authentication for staff logins. They are structurally defenseless against those automated exploits we discussed earlier.
And at the exact same time they are failing to secure basic logins, AI is flooding into these classrooms. It's no longer a pilot program, it's daily reality.
And it's creating a massive philosophical divide.
For sure. You have administrators using it as an efficiency tool to automate grading and lesson planning, but then you have parents terrified about data privacy and the loss of authentic learning.
Which is why 2 separate research reports published this week are aggressively pushing back against this efficiency-first model of AI in education.
Right, they're saying we're looking at this all wrong.
Exactly. They argue that deploying these tools simply to reduce administrative overhead fundamentally misses the point of education. They're advocating for a human-centered framework where AI is strictly evaluated on how it improves student outcomes and supports that vital interpersonal relationship between a teacher and a student.
Because is the goal of a classroom to produce outputs quickly, or is the goal the messy, inefficient process of actually learning how to think?
Right. The process is the point.
Exactly. And speaking of the cost of all this efficiency, we have to look at the physical toll this digital acceleration is taking on the planet.
The energy demands.
The computing power required to run these AI models is just astronomical. Meta, Microsoft, and Google are all actively committing to building or contracting massive new natural gas power plants just to fuel their AI data centers.
Because the energy draw of a sprawling AI server farm cannot be sustained by current renewable grids alone.
Right.
So by pivoting to natural gas, these tech giants are directly contradicting their own heavily publicized climate commitments.
Yeah.
Environmental analysts are warning that these contracts will lock in massive carbon emissions for decades to come.
The irony here is just thick. We are essentially beta testing the most powerful, unregulated technology in human history on our kids in public schools that don't even have basic multi-factor authentication to stop ransomware.
Yeah.
And to power the server farms running this grand experiment, we are actively burning our climate goals to the ground by building natural gas plants. It is a violent collision of the digital illusion of infinite progress and the harsh physical limits of our planet.
The acceleration of the digital world is physically consuming the resources of the tangible world to sustain its own growth. It's an unsustainable loop.
It really is. And that is a staggering amount of systemic vulnerability to process. We've gone from gridlock peace talks to AI arms races to schools under siege.
It's heavy.
It's very heavy. But we promised you at the top of this deep dive that we would shift gears to something entirely different. A moment that steps away from the algorithms and the synthetic media and focuses purely on human resilience.
Yeah, the cultural trends from this weekend provide a fascinating counter-narrative to everything we've just discussed.
The weekend delivered some massive cultural moments. UFC 327 saw Jiri Prochazka headline a brutal fight against Magomed Ankalaev.
Right.
Coachella 2026 took over the timeline, with K-pop star Taemin bringing out surprise guests and dominating social media with the hashtag Tangemchella.
But the moment that really eclipsed everything else, the moment the internet is universally celebrating today, is Bieberchella.
Justin Bieber returning to the Coachella stage on Saturday night as a surprise headliner.
And to understand why the internet lost its collective mind over this, you have to look at the physical reality of what he's been through.
Right. Over the last few years, Bieber has suffered incredibly severe, heavily documented health battles. He dealt with Lyme disease and then a terrifying diagnosis of Ramsay-Hunt syndrome.
Which is a neurological disorder that literally paralyzed half of his face.
Right. His body fundamentally failed him. It was this profound public display